The prevalent business model for tech startups these days is software as a service. It's not a new business model. It's been around since the early 2000s, but it continues to grow and evolve. The big question is, what will happen with the arrival of AI? Coming up on this episode of Techopia Live. Hi, Michael Curran from the Ottawa Business Journal. Welcome to another episode of Techopia Live. Techopia seeks to inform the local tech sector, keep them connected, and also explore issues, all with a goal of connecting everyone and boosting Ottawa's tech sector. As you might have already noticed, this is not a remote recording of our local podcast. We are actually on location here at the newly rebranded Rogers Centre in beautiful downtown Ottawa for one of the most important tech events of the year, SaaS North. There are literally thousands of people from around Canada and the world converging on this convention center to explore the big world of the SaaS industry. There's lots of local speakers here, as well as international speakers. I'll point out some of the local people speaking. We've got Aidan Murzai, Michael Potter, Kayla Noivu, Niraj Bhargava, Eric Adjaman, Sarah Sedgman, and also Sarah Daniele. So we got some national speakers, some global speakers, and some great local content. And speaking of great local content, let's meet our guests here today. First up, we have Susan Richards. Susan, you are the co-founder of numbercrunch, a regular guest on Techopia Live, and have played some really important roles in the city, including being a co-chair Invest Ottawa. Welcome,
Thank
Susan.
you so much. Happy to be here.
And another big deal in the local tech sector, someone that kind of operated his own company for many years, Pound Taxi. And these days, you're helping boost and accelerate lots of the city's technology startups, including some SaaS players. So we're going to talk about that. Welcome to Nick Quain.
Awesome to be here at SaaS North with you both.
All right, Susan, this is a big deal for Ottawa. As I indicated, thousands of people are converging here. And it's not only local people. We love the local people. But it's an opportunity for Ottawa really kind of to reflect what it's at, get people to the city, check things out. What does SaaS North mean for you?
Yeah, SaaS North is a wonderful place for everybody to come together. So it's all things SaaS. It's huge. It gets bigger and better every year. It's the place where everybody will be walking around asking, are you from here? Because there's so many people coming in, they actually don't assume that your presence means you're local. And you could be a founder, you could be ecosystem partner, you could be investor. They're all colliding and communicating together. It's fantastic.
And it helps feed the energy of the community. You walked up for this interview, Susan, and you were bubbling over with energy. I'm so energized. So that's part of what it accomplishes.
That's right. And it's an old home week. For a lot of people come back here in a year, or they may have taken a break from a year or two due to other obligations. So there is that old home week feel too, where you get to, deepen relationships and keep that energy flow. It's a good vibe.
Yeah, being in person works. Nick, any observations on what SaaS North is doing for the city?
Yeah, I mean, I think first it helps put Ottawa on the map. You're seeing a lot of, Susan mentioned, a lot of investors, different ecosystem players, founders who come to Ottawa and they're here for the first time. And that's fun. You're talking to someone who's never been here and they're looking out across the city from this beautiful convention center. So that's kind of fun and exciting to have this new blood that comes into town. And then I think part of it then is all of the connections. There's reconnections between our ecosystem. There's connections, from national players that are coming in, repeat times, and then there's all this new blood coming in from investors that are getting connected. And then, you top it off with like world-class content. Like you have Neil Patel talking about digital marketing today. He's like the OG of digital marketing, talking about the latest trends in digital marketing and being able to have our founders and the attendees to be able to glean a little bit of wisdom from the likes of Neil is awesome.
And it's probably fair to say, Nick, that there's actual business getting done, and I don't mean term sheets being passed around, but there's relationships that are leading to funders or some strategic relationships? Are those types of discussions happening here too?
Absolutely. I mean, on the way down here, Sarah Sedgman, who you mentioned, was like, Nick, where can I meet with this investor? And we're, sent them off to an area that we've set aside for one-to-one meetings. So that's happening for sure.
Yeah.
The conference does a good job too of allowing you to reach out and connect with people that are attending. And a lot of people have a pretty full agenda before the event even starts, let alone all the serendipitous kind of conversations and connections that happen along the way.
Yeah, awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the local SaaS industry. All of us have been around watching the tech sector for 20, 30 years. Let's not even focus on how long it's been. But certainly SaaS was like instrumental in kind of Ottawa's rebounding after kind of that telecom bust that we don't need to focus on. But the SaaS has become really important, right?
Yeah.
There were those early players. Many of them are still here. Give me a sense of what you're seeing from the local SaaS companies. Like, why are they embracing this business model? Maybe we could start with that question with you, Susan, since you do actually advise people on it.
Yeah.
Why is it a great business model?
Well, the recurring revenue business model is just super lucrative, so it's a real attractor to investors. It's not for the faint of heart, so you don't. It's very difficult to get off the ground and to get to a sustainable level. But if you get there, the opportunity for accelerated growth, exponential growth, is huge, and so it's very intriguing. It attracts the most risk-friendly, ambitious, smartest people, really. Yeah.
And let's just explore that business model a little bit. The monthly recurring revenue, annual recurring revenue, obviously has a ton of appeal.
Yeah.
Does it still have as much appeal as it did maybe 10 years ago when it kind of took hold?
Well, it's always changing, which is another good reason for organizations like SaaS North to come and educate, because there's shifts. So for example, 10 years ago, profitability was not of interest. It was all revenue growth at all cost. Okay. In the last couple of years, we've seen now where we want revenue growth tempered with sustainability, which means profitability. So it's always shifting, and as a result, founders have to be staged at what they do. They have to learn from failures of others that come, and the successes and the failures really can help. So it's always shifting though, and you have to stay on top of, they're not trends so much as they are the latest and greatest information with innovation. Because as we were talking about digital marketing, for example, the digital platforms are changing too. So you don't do old school digital on the new environments where we have AI. Nick can talk more to this kind of area.
And maybe a couple questions for you, Nick. The first one is just, is it still fair to think that SaaS companies are kind of most of the emerging tech companies in Ottawa are using a SaaS model, like when you think of the Rewinds and so on and so forth?
Yeah,
is that still true?
Yeah, I think that's still true. I think that's been true for quite some time. You've seen that generation of the Rewinds, the Noibus, the Knacks, who have reached, kind of a critical post-Series A stage. But even still, the next, we still see a robust mix of different founders from different models in different sectors, but SaaS still dominates in terms of the business model, software-based model. It's an appealing one for a lot of different reasons that Susan touched on, that people get, and it's easy to understand. And once you've built a foundation of SaaS and ARR, that's a very strong foundational piece for a tech business.
And Nick, you're bumping into every day. You operate kind of the accelerator at Invest Ottawa. Is this the model that you're recommending, or is this the model that most people are walking in the door saying, "Hey, Nick, we've got this technology idea. How do we grow it?" Are people kind of being not forced, but recommended into that model still, or is there other business models to explore?
I think most people come in with that idea. Okay. How do I turn this idea into a SaaS model? And I think more often than not, we're, especially early on, cautioning them about being presumptive about that. There are great transaction-based models, right? Some of the most lucrative companies in the world are not SaaS models. They're transaction-based models, or been built off them in terms of a Google or an Amazon, or you think of the big anchor players. So there's nothing wrong with transaction-based revenue, and even service-based revenue at the beginning, thinking that's a four-letter word or bad for investors. Who cares? If you're going to bootstrap your business, that's what's going to enable you to build what is a very hard business model at the start. Like it might take you a year to get 5K, 10K a month in recurring revenue. Well, it's start to hard for a founder to envision a salary or paying employees in 5 to 10K. So wrapping it around in other funding or other revenue rather does make sense. And while SaaS SaaS inevitably becomes a key part of most of the businesses that come along. They shouldn't be like hyper-focused on that into itself.
Nick, I imagine, Susan will come to you with the same question in a minute, that AI is a big discussion with SaaS. A lot of it involves recurring systems or processes or onboarding clients, and AI's impact on marketing, of course,
Sure.
Is having an impact right now that will accelerate. AI, what is the chatter with AI? Is everybody looking to wrap their hands around this rocket ship?
Yeah, I think right now there's a really healthy strategic discussion around AI where you thought 8 months ago, a year ago, it was kind of like not flavor of the day, but there was this hype of like be all and end all. And like you see with a lot of things, there's a hype, everyone adopts it, and then like a lot of people out there, maybe they're not using ChatGPT as much right now as maybe they were last March, right? And so there's a little bit of a lack of delivery on some of the hype, but it's very real what's happening. I think it's creating disruptions at both ends. I think that on one hand, it's allowed startups to use AI to do more with less, and to be able to do more with their product, baking in, layering onto a LM and having an API that could light up a product or a go-to-market or creating content or all sorts of things just from an operational efficiency. At the same time, it's also creating in the industry at a macro level a bit of a race to zero for some SaaS. So for some SaaS, it is getting cheaper, easier. You're seeing copycat products that have 80% of the function, but for 80% less or 90% less cost. And I think we'll see that continue. So it's a very interesting time because it creates all this disruption that creates a bit of mayhem, hard to see into the future. But in the end, that's benefit to the small, nimble founder who can pivot and adjust. And so it's an exciting time.
On the financial strategic advice side,
Yeah.
Susan, you must be having these conversations on a regular basis with your clients. What are those discussions like, and what advice are you giving them when it comes to AI?
Yeah, well, I think, adapting it to it, being open in so many ways. I think sometimes people are thinking about it as in a more siloed effect, but AI plays a role in kind of every department within an organization and can certainly help either make a bigger impact or be more cost effective. But generally in a marginal kind of way, like from a practical sense. I think we're at the stage now where there's lots of tools out there that people can practically use, and they should be. Like everybody should be adopting and adapting to the AI landscape that we're in, and it's just going to make us better, more impactful, either greater output or more cost effective. And in some cases, Nick has pointed out, it's just going to flip everything completely up. Somebody might have been working on something for 3 years, and now something else has just been instantly, somewhat replacing it. That's not new in innovation.
No.
It's just another form of it. So these are all, entrepreneurs that come to places like SaaS North. They're nimble. They are often on multiple startups. So they're the type of people that can take that and either be energized by it, recreate, pivot, and ultimately, be better for it. So I'm all for listening to how people are using AI and encouraging that people put it into their strategic planning and understand what the budgetary factors may be for their companies too.
Great conversation so far. Let's take a quick pause to recognize the sponsor of this episode, numbercrunch. numbercrunch is an Ottawa-based firm that allows you to strategically outsource your financials, especially if you're a technology startup or scaling your business. numbercrunch services range from bookkeeping to payroll to full virtual CFO services, including fundraising preparation and cash flow forecasting. Led by Susan Richards and Craig Hung, numbercrunch is supported by an established team of financial professionals who have advised and supported hundreds of firms. numbercrunch's cost-effective subscription model affords you the right expertise for every stage of your business. Let numbercrunch help your company mitigate risk by ensuring proper accounting procedures are in place, providing you with strategic input and scaling along with your business. For a quote on outsourcing and accounting, please visit numbercrunch.ca. numbercrunch, strength in numbers. And we're back. Thanks again to numbercrunch for all of its support of Techopia Live and the bigger Techopia project. We're back here with Susan Richards from numbercrunch, Nick Quain from Invest Ottawa. Nick, we're going to explore a bit of a different topic. And I admit it's a little bit of navel gazing here. And for some reason, either as Ottawans or Canadians, we seem to do this a lot. There are a lot of people trying to assess where this technology community is at. We were at TiCon last week, and there was yet another comment about trying to measure Ottawa from a total venture capital on an annual basis. There was some sort of reference made statistical to how Ottawa might be kind of the ninth in total venture capital. There's a idea that you've been planting a little bit in person and online. It's not the first time I heard you speak about it. You spoke about it at the Bootstrap Awards last year. But I think it's taking hold right now. And the idea is Bootstrap City, Nick. And what you're suggesting, I think, is we might need to adjust the way we're thinking about the local tech ecosystem and how we measure its progress because of this unique aspect, bootstrapping. Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it in that there's this navel gazing or this scoreboard watching that is related to venture capital specifically. Right, and measuring venture capital, and even those measurements are imperfect. They miss a lot of, like the Venture Capital Association misses certain, private funding deals or strictly American deals. But all that aside, there's no doubt that Ottawa has traditionally received less venture capital funding per capita, certainly per startup, per tech employee, whatever multiple you want to look at. Ottawa's always received less, but when you look at the output of what Ottawa produces, you start to recognize that there is an incongruence between the amount of capital that we get and then the type of tech success or the other tech indicators of success. Like, we are the #1 concentration of tech talent in North America, but we've consistently not been in the top 5 of venture capital in Canada. So how can we, how are we, we have the highest density of our neighbors being in tech than anywhere else in North America. It's the same as San Francisco, and yet we have all this, this lack of venture capital that's coming in. Something else, must be amiss. We have 2 of the top 10 tech companies by capitalization in Canada. We have the top one in Shopify that is worth more than the next 3 or 4 combined, and then we have Kinaxis, another top 10. We have, Fullscript, another amazing software company. We have Ascent. We have we have all of these incredible tech success that are the envy of other cities in this country that are trying to replicate what Ottawa has. But then meanwhile, at the same time, we're looking at this venture capital number as if it's the be all and end all. It's kind of like looking at hockey stats and seeing the shots per game to figure out what the rankings are in the standings. All that matters are wins. And wins are big anchor companies that create thousands of jobs that are here for the long run. And Ottawa has those. And the profile of those companies tend to have come from a bootstrapping nature. Right? These are companies that built fundamentals. Susan could certainly speak to focusing on the fundamentals and profitability and getting the escape velocity of that discipline that it imposes on companies. Ottawa's had that discipline for longer, and I think over time you just see the fruits that Ottawa's been able to realize from that culture.
And Susan, let's bring you into this.
Yeah.
You have a long perspective on this, so you've probably seen those years in maybe the early 2000s where there was, big numbers being put up on the board, and maybe things have shifted a little bit. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I see a big mix, and I would say there are a number of founders here that are focused on the fundamentals, and they don't necessarily want to take on outside investment until they understand how they're going to deploy it to actually generate the return that they want, because they're strategic and they're really smart up front. That's not to say that smart people don't want to raise money sooner, so I'm not making any blanket statements, but it's not one way to go about this. And we do have a lot of critical thinkers. It is a smart town. It's a calculated situation, and some of our funding gaps that come and go, like, first of all, necessity is the mother of invention. So in some eras, every few years, there was a lot of money flowing during COVID. Now, we've got a softer period, so there's a shift that has to happen as a result of that. But from my standpoint, looking out, I see all kinds. It's interesting that when we look at the lists, that the lists say what the lists say. But I think from this community, it's a community of people who are very strategic about what they're doing, and that can impact the staging of investment.
Yeah, and I think there's some thinking, Nick, that this isn't black and white, but there are some advantages to a founder-led company that's bootstrapping for as long as possible, and then really identifying what that market fit is, who that customer is, bringing on some referral customers, and going. There is an advantage to that, clearly.
Absolutely, and it's not to say that our top bootstrapping companies don't ultimately raise capital.
Yeah.
They just raise it later as a pure accelerant for the business. When they look at the business and say, oh my gosh, I see the opportunity cost that's lost here if I had more sales, more marketing, more product adoption. The market's pulling me, and I don't have the resources to meet that pull. That's an amazing spot to raise capital from, and that's where our bootstrappers have decided when they're going to raise capital based on that market signal. If you raise money earlier, you're using it to fill a gap in your P&L, like in your cash flow. And truthfully, like raising money, building a tech startup, it is really hard, but getting that infusion of capital it's kind of like this short-term thing for a founder to go, oh my God, wouldn't it be nice? It's like, okay, I can relax now, and it's not that. It's not, when you might have that feeling of all of a sudden, okay, I've got a salary and my staff have salary, and I now have 9 months of runway, but I don't have a profitable business, and now I've been forced to spend that money in the short term to meet metrics that I might or might not be fully confident I'm going to reach, because sometimes you're putting the best face on what what might happen if you take those dollars on without 100% confidence, and then the moment you don't hit those multiples, you've set your startup back, and you're in a bit of a pickle. I'm sure you've dealt with many venture-backed firms that are now in a little bit of a situation that it's not going to be easy to bootstrap. They have investors that don't want them to bootstrap, and it's not going to be easy to raise because you haven't met your forecasts.
Yeah.
You handed over some equity, you've handed over some control. So Terry Matthews always tells us it's all about timing.
Yeah.
So you must advise some companies, Susan, on when is the right time, to go for that raise.
Yeah.
Any general advice if there's someone watching here and they're like, well, I'm not sure where I'm at. Like, I'm a SaaS company, I've got a good ARR, but when is that time to really put my foot to the pedal to the metal?
Well, I'm often asked that question, and then my answer is to ask, well, how much do you need? What people don't do is actually forecast out how their business is going to perform, how they speculate they will drive revenue, and what it's going to cost to get there. So therefore, they're not that great at measuring often how much they need to raise. Once they have that sense of how much they need, there are other options that they can leverage as well. There's non-dilutive options that you can take advantage of earlier on. So I'm always encouraging maximizing that in addition to angel money early on in order to get to a certain milestone. And as Nick said, once you start taking on that money, you're now in this cycle, and it's longer and longer to raise. So you're in a fundraising cycle. So making sure you have it right. That product market fit can usually be confirmed when your churn rate or your retention rate, they're inverse of each other, when that's at a solid level. That's usually when I might, at that point. Plus, you have to have an understanding of how you're going to acquire customers en masse. That's another.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
You don't want to get the check before you know that.
Before you know that. That's right.
That's great advice. We're going to start wrapping up, Nick, but obviously you're here as a representative of Invest Ottawa. Maybe give us a little bit of a look into 2024 and 2025 and beyond. Anything on your radar for what you're looking to accomplish in the next several months as it relates to the local tech sector?
Well, I think you touched on it with AI. I think one of the biggest benefits we can help our startup founders is helping them distill some of the opportunities, the lower hanging fruit of where to use AI, how to use AI, how to build it into your startup, how to be more efficient. There's a huge focus on profitability with companies, how to create and glean that efficiency so you're getting more revenue per employee. So you'll see a lot of that. And then at the same time, strategically trying to get things on their radar for the threats of AI and how what might be coming down the pipeline for some of those companies so that they're ready for them strategically.
Yeah, it seems like there's two sides of that coin.
There is,
It seems so reminiscent, by the way, of the late '90s, where .com was taking.
Yes.
What is this
taking,
internet
yes.
thing that's coming?
Yeah,
you
like
know?
it reminds me so much. Yeah. But without getting too deep into it, I do think there is always that, and it was mentioned at TiCon as well by Tony Belletti, one of the big tech thinkers. There's always that kind of the hype cycle, a little bit of a letdown, and then a complete change in everyone's business model, right? So I don't know where we are exactly. But Susan, looking forward to a great 2025, of course. Any plans at NumberCrunch or any things you'll be particularly advising your clients on in the coming year?
Yeah, well, we're doing a lot more playbooks. So first of all, it's 10 years for us. So
wow.
we just celebrated.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we're not good at celebrating because we're always doing, but it's a real, it's an opportunity for us to take a look at what we've learned. And we're obsessed with the founder journey, and we've built out now programs for everything from the launch right through the exit. So we can be that financial backbone through all the stages. And so, it's more of the same. We've got a new space. We've got room to grow. We've just done a big recruiting blitz too, so poised for a really solid 2025.
Excellent. We wish you all the best. To Susan from NumberCrunch and Nick from Invest Ottawa. Thanks for being part of this episode of Techopia Live from SaaS North. And I want to thank you for tuning in. If you like the podcast, please give us a like and share. Mention it to some people. On behalf of OBJ and our guest today, I want to wrap up. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.